Good morning.
Good
How are
morning,
you,
Susan.
Allison?
I am good. I am back in the office. I was out for almost 3 weeks.
Wow.
Um, yeah, tell me about it. It was great. It was great. And
Well,
now
you're
I'm
looking
back and
good.
trying to
You look refreshed and all eager and shiny, ready to get,
shiny.
like,
I'm, do I have a
you're
glow?
yeah, there's a
I
little
guess the clouds behind me are my new glow. I
yeah,
did change my background.
I see that.
These are actually the Transylvanian mountains in Romania. I did not get eaten by Dracula, nor did I see Dracula, except
You didn't
in
go to the
his.
the castle?
I did go to the castle.
Ooh,
I
I want to
did. I
see
did go to the
pictures.
castle. Yeah, the castle is actually really interesting. It's Bron Castle. It's really interesting because there is literally zero evidence that Vlad the Impaler, who Dracula is based off of,
Yeah.
ever went there at all. But apparently, the castle was some of the inspiration for the Dracula book. So, what the outside of the castle has a whole bunch of Dracula things, which are quite funny outside, but inside the castle, a lot of it is just Romanian history. And then they
Okay.
have a few rooms that are Dracula based, like these little visual things where Dracula's coming out to try and eat you, and werewolves, and then there's a torture chamber and some things like that. So that was actually pretty funny. And it was pouring down buckets the day we were at the castle, so it added
Oh,
to the atmosphere
yeah,
of
I
of
bet.
like scary whatever. Yeah.
Well,
But
how
these are
fun.
the mountains in Transylvania, so now I can say I've been to Transylvania, and they were just stunning and gorgeous, and yeah, it was an amazing time.
Well,
We
what
hiked
a
up these
cool,
peaks behind me. Yeah.
wow, what a cool expedition.
Yeah. Well, you know me, always trying to go to the places that the people don't go to.
Which
It's
is
my
a
it's my
which is a
favorite thing.
fun, bucket list item.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Actually, it was never on my bucket list. I will admit, Romania was never on my radar at all, but my cousin lives in Europe and has a friend from Bucharest. So it was on her radar. And then as soon as I started looking at it, I thought, well, okay. And I will say that just last night I was looking at Andorra for next year, maybe when my son is in Spain and we go to visit him. And I had to look it up on a map where it was in the Pyrenees, and that might be on my list now as another place that nobody goes because nobody knows where it is.
Cool. That's
So
very
yeah,
fun.
it was very fun. And now I'm back. Reentry is always a little bit hard after being away. I do love what I do, but I have to completely switch gears with my head. So I've been back for about a week, so I am back in it. But it's a little weird, you know?
Well, today we are kind of touching on a subject that we've danced around before, and then we had dedicated one episode before. So this episode's going to be a little bit more meat than just potatoes, so to speak. We're going to
We're
get
going
into the
technical today.
yeah, we're going a little bit
Yeah.
more technical, which I know I like because that's where I live is on that technical side, trying to figure things out and why is this not working. So we're very pleased to bring on today's guest, Kim Nevitt. Come on, Kim. There you are.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Hey,
Oh,
Kim.
it's such a
Welcome.
treat. Thank
It's
you
a
for
treat to
joining
be
us.
here with both of you.
Yeah, you're going to be our technical girl
Oh,
today. So I'll
there
just
goes
say
the
right up
name.
front, as often my job is to pull Susan back a little bit from the technical so that people, we don't go too far in the weeds. But today we are going to go in the weeds. So we'll
Yay.
try and keep it so that everybody will understand what's happening. But we will also go a little further in the weeds with you because you are such a tech guru. in the photo organizing world, and we're super happy to have you. So if you could start us off by just, telling us a little bit about you and your background and your business to get us
Sure.
going.
So I am a professional photo manager, just like you guys are. My business is Silver Moon Photo Organizing. And I think the thing that really brought me into this is, and has always been kind of a common thread throughout my life, has been I love puzzles. I like to solve puzzles. I love asking why and understanding how and all like that. And so when I started off, my background was in physics, and I actually went through the master's program in nuclear physics, but I started off doing things with Department of Defense and the United States Space and Strategic Command Center and things like that. And that really wasn't where my heart lies because I'm also very sensitive. So I ended up working with NASA, and I worked on space shuttle programs, and I worked with the space station. I actually got up to being the payload ops director on space station with NASA. But at that point, I was almost 40 and I really wanted to start a family. So I had gotten married and we wanted to start a family. We were both in aerospace. And at that time, I was working back out in California at Stanford on a gravity mission to prove or disprove a theory of Einstein's relativity. It was called Gravity Probe B with Stanford University, NASA, and Lockheed Martin. So I got all into that and we looked at each other and decided this is risky. If the rocket blows up, we're both out of a job, at least this way. It's going to become complicated. And at that point, we had already had our first child, and I was pregnant with my second child. And so we decided I really wanted to come home and do what was going to be my next chapter in life, which was to be a mother, which was way harder than nuclear physics or rocket science. So that's what I did. And I have two wonderful children who've now grown up to be wonderful adults that I would choose to be friends with, not just because they're my children, but because they're such delightful people. And at that point, I was like, what am I going to do? And this presented itself in a weird way to me. But I have to say, what I love about it is never a dull moment. We are constantly having to solve a new puzzle or a new problem or a different way of looking at things. And I have really just found that I get so excited to work on the things that I work on because it is constantly a challenge. It's always constantly stretching you in new directions. And it's such meaningful work because of what we do by saving people's photos, by making them transferable into the future to future generations and legacy and capturing those stories. So that's pretty much all about me, probably more than anybody really wanted to know, but there it is. And that's how I've gotten to be where I am now as a photo manager and loving this kind of stuff and the challenges that it brings to us.
I love that. I love learning about people's backgrounds and how they reinvent themselves and
Yeah.
enter different career changes and whatnot. So that's really exciting. How fun.
Well, and the three of us are like that, right? We all come
Mhm.
from very varied and different
Yeah.
walks of life. And here we are now together on this same path with the same kind of passion. And so it's pretty exciting. It's exciting stuff.
Not
Yeah.
all of us have worked for NATO, I will say. Or sorry, not NATO, but
NASA.
not all
I
of us,
was going to say,
NASA.
well,
Sorry,
I can't talk
hair,
about
head's still in
the
the
NATO
clouds here.
part. Yeah, that
Yeah.
would have to kill you. So I won't do that. No, friend.
Under an NDA for the rest of your life.
I
Yeah.
believe that.
No
Yeah, of one
kidding.
form or another. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, so we all have had those great, you know, career changes that have brought us together, and we're excited to have you join us today. So let's get started with the meat of today's topic, as I like to say, which is what is metadata and why does it matter, Kim?
So metadata is kind of like when we were kids and our parents had the collection of pictures and you would flip the picture over and there'd be the who and the what and the where and all that interesting information that gave context to our photos. Metadata is the thing that provides the context and answers those questions of who is this and where is this and what's happening, right? And so nowadays with digital pictures, metadata can be attached in a digital form to that image, right? And so instead of having the physical photo where you have it written on the back, now we have the digital photo with incorporated information that is called metadata. And there are three different kinds that we talk about. So there is EXIF. EXIF is an acronym, and I can tell you what it means. It stands for, if you need to know, Exchangeable Image File Format. I don't memorize these things. I have enough
I don't
acronyms
either.
from my old life that I don't try to keep them in my current processing. So exchangeable image file format. And really, you don't need to know that. The only thing you need to know is EXIF data is what the camera did while that photo was being taken. So that's EXIF data. It's the things like what your settings were on your camera and what the actual timestamp of when the snap date, the picture was taken at a date and a time. And
Also, what kind of camera?
what kind of
Yeah.
camera.
Yep.
I mean,
And
all this information that photographers love and really want to know and need to
but
have.
it's a clue.
And it's a clue. It's always, all of these are clues, and all of these are the answering the, W's and the one H of what this photo is. The next kind is IPTC. Again, I can look up what is IPTC.
International Photographers Trade Commission.
Press.
Oh, I
International
was close.
Press
You were close.
Telecommunications Council. We're not going to memorize these guys. We have far
No.
too many important things to know not to have to know that this is International Press Telecommunications Council. And really, it was used by journalists and newspapers. And the only thing you really need to know about IPTC, not what it actually stands for, is that it is about what the photo is about and who owns it.
Yep.
So it's like, who is the creator of this photo? Especially if it's a photograph, they're going to want to have their, copyright on it. And it's going to be, IPTC can cover a lot of those questions about what the photo is about. It can contain, location information. It can contain important things that back in journalist days and not back in, but still for newspapers and things, that kind of information, the things that were important to them, and the who and the where and the what and the how, and maybe some captions, right? About
Although
what this photo
yeah,
is, the
the
context.
IPTC is more important for professionals. So for professional photographers or journalists than it is for our average user. Like I don't use it a
That's
whole
right.
lot, but I do use it for every time I pull in photos from my real camera, my copyright stamp and my name
Right.
go in
Right.
there. For most people, like our average listener, most of those fields, maybe none of those fields are going to be that impactful for them unless they are, like I said, professional photographers and things, because it's more about who owns the photograph, I think, and the information that that owner wants to impart. So you can add like your email address and a phone number and a message like do not distribute, that kind of thing. That's what will go in the IPTC fields.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was, they needed to have a standard amongst, agencies, news agencies, and journalism. And so that's why those fields were created in such a way to be able to share that information as they were sharing information back and forth across these agencies.
And one last thing on that is a lot of people won't be able to see those fields. So, like Apple Photos, I don't think you can see them.
I don't think you can in Apple Photos.
Google, I don't think you can either.
Mm-mm,
So, they're
definitely not.
important to mention, but I think we'll be focusing more on some of the EXIF and the other fields that you're going to talk about.
The third type, that leads us to the
Yes,
third type. Thank you for the segue, Allison. So the
anytime.
third type is XMP. XMP is Extensible Metadata Platform. And this is really, for most users, and even for a lot of us, this is really where we do a lot of our information. This is going to contain all of this other information, right? We're going to have the date and we're going to have all of that, but there's so much more to XMP. This is where keywords happen and captions and titles and all the stuff that we would have written on the back of our photos. So those are the three types of metadata. And yeah, I think that provides pretty much the framework of the information that can go along with photos.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about XMP files because not everybody's going to see those either. How
Right.
do those get created?
So typically XMP files, when you bring up a photo in a photo editor or a photo viewer, in any of our different management programs, like whether it's Apple Photos or Google Photos or however we choose to look at our photos, most of that has fields that you can add information. A lot of people have iPhones. You can go in there, you can add facial recognition. This is a face region. You can add keywords. You can add all of these things to make your photos more accessible. If you have scanned data, you're going to want to add the date the photo was taken because scanned data never comes in with the correct date. It comes in on the date that you scanned it. And so in order to really have a good representation in your collection, if you're adding scanned photos, you need to go ahead and add that date information. And that is probably one of the trickiest parts about metadata.
And so one thing I just want to say, because it may not be clear, is the program would make the XMP file automatically if it needs to be created. A lot of software programs are what's called non-destructive.
Yes.
And so because of that reason, that data has to go somewhere because it's not being added to the file itself as it's
Well, and
being created.
that's an interesting thing too, because those XMP, they actually have a separate file. So when you do any kind of a change to a photo, if it's a non-destructive editor, and we can talk about that, but any change you're making, whether it's an editing change or whether it's adding this additional information, I would say most applications do what's called non-destructive editing, in that everything that you're doing to that photo or adding to that photo is not actually a part of that photo. Think of the photo like a box, right? You've got inside the box the stuff that comes from the camera and the things that we don't affect, like the XMP. A lot of the XMP stuff is actually outside of the file box, this file, the image file. And it's kind of like a post-it note that you put with it. And you have to be careful about that because this XMP is in a separate file. It'll have the same name, but it'll have an extension called .xmp, and that's where all those changes are and all that additional information. And you need to be very careful how you handle that because it, I like to use the post-it note because it's not necessarily really secure. And you need to be careful that if you're moving that box around, that post-it note doesn't get blown away, so
Right.
to speak. But
Yeah.
yes,
And again,
it's an
yeah,
extra
most people
file.
aren't going to see the file too.
Right.
So like
In
if
the
again, if
Apple
you're in
environment, you don't
As
get to
long as
see anything.
you're
exactly
correct. Yeah, you're
in
exactly,
Apple and Google, you won't see them. It doesn't mean it's not there, but
it's
you won't
there.
see it. In
Right.
other programs, you will see it. So if you're a Milio user and you ever go behind the hood, you will see XMP files next to almost every photo that you have. They're
Yep.
little tiny, tiny files, and don't
Well,
delete
and
them. I always tell
they're
people don't
called
delete.
sidecar files. So it's just
Yeah.
like the motorcycle with the sidecar. And you've got the motorcycle and then you've got this little sidecar. It's not really part of your motorcycle, but it's attached to it, right?
Hmm.
And you're right. Most of the time, you're not going to see it. When you're in an application, then you're looking through the application and it's part of the application. The XMP is sort of outside of the application. So that's an important thing to know in that as long as you're looking at it through the lens of the application where this XMP was created, because you're adding the data in the application, you're just fine. The trouble comes when you try to export or when you look at it outside of the application. And that's where you need to know that this file exists because it is a separate file. Now, there are ways where you can take that post-it note and put it inside the box, but you have to understand how you do that. And that's called baking the data in. And I don't want to jump ahead too much, so I'm going to slow down a little bit here. But yeah, the way that you would take that external XMP file and actually get it to be part of the original file is getting baked in. The important thing to know here, and this is why a lot of photographers like non-destructive editing, is because if you want to keep your pristine alpha photograph that you've taken with your expensive photography equipment, and you want to keep it pristine because you might want to come back, you want to make some edits, but you may want to get back and do some different edits, like you're going to change it to black and white or sepia, or you're going to do something different with it, and you want your original unmarred source material, then you want to keep that XMP separate. Because the second that you do something to burn it into the file, now it's part of the file and that's your new source file. Unless you make a copy, that original is gone. Now you could make a copy and then use the copy to burn in, and now you have the original copy and an edited copy, which is a nice way to go, and what a lot of photographers will do. Now let's go back to the hat of the casual user. The casual user is making changes and adding information that they want to be permanent. Now, photographers may want to fool around with the original stuff, but most casual users want that stuff to be permanent. And so they need to know that if they're using one of these non-destructive editing programs, that if they actually want it to be the original photo with the changes that they've made, because they like the edits they've made and they want to keep the file location, the people, the facial recognition, the only way that's going to become part of the file is to export it and burn it in. I'm going to
It's
slow
even a
down
little
and let you guys.
more, yeah, there's a little more to it even than that. So I was thinking about our Apple Photos users, which I
Yeah.
think we have a lot of people that listen to Apple Photos. So you will never see your XMP file on Apple Photos. And
No.
if you text or email a photo to somebody, you are essentially exporting it and baking in all of your changes. However, if you go into Apple Photos on your computer and you click export, file export, you'll have options. And the options are export unmodified original, I think
Yep.
is the right
Yes.
phrasing. Um,
Uh,
I'd have to go into actually, but you've got two options. One is to export unmodified original, and
that's
one
it.
is to export, I forget how they phrase it. I should have looked
One
that up.
photo.
One photo or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and those will give you two different things.
Yep. And those are
So
the only
now,
two options that you have when you go to export a
yes,
photo.
I
Yeah.
have a
and that's
question
it.
though.
And,
Can you not
but
export unmodified original with certain kinds of metadata? So that
not
it's,
an Apple, I don't think.
I think so, because you can
Or
actually,
can you
as long
choose?
as those edits didn't affect the pixels. So it's not going to take an edited photo that's been brightened or contrast or toned or anything, but you can export the unmodified original with metadata that isn't necessarily changing the original photo. So it would be the extra metadata like
I
XMP
don't think
stuff.
you have those options. So I
Yeah.
actually just brought up
Actually,
Apple Photos because I'm
you
going to try that while we're here.
you do. There's a little
Let's
dialog box
see.
that opens up
You
Mhm.
don't
and
with
you
a
do
single photo, I
Maybe not
don't
with a single
think.
photo, but if you do an export, you can do unmodified originals with
it says
metadata, but it's
yeah,
added
Uh,
metadata. So
it
it's
says
like facial
exports
recognition.
IPTC as
as
XMP.
XMP, but that's the unmodified original, right? So then you're
Yes.
getting you're creating a sidecar file
Yes.
is what we're doing there. But
Yep.
I don't think you can choose, maybe I misunderstood what you were saying. Yeah, I don't think you can choose to export with, let's see.
Oh,
Oh,
you're
you
saying,
can, okay, you can choose. So if you choose export photo, which
Uh-huh.
is to bacon, on Apple Photos, which is the only thing we're talking about at this right at this moment, you can choose to include title, keyword, and caption, but you can't choose one or the other. It's all three or none.
ah,
You can choose to include location information. Those are your only two
Yep.
options
so
with
really the
Apple
thing that gets
anyway.
left off is facial recognition, unless
Yep.
you go in
Yeah.
and you add the faces as keywords. So you can at
Yep.
least have a keyword of the person that's in the photo,
Yes.
Yep.
but the
Exactly.
facial recognition
Yeah.
space will be gone.
Right.
And but you don't have granular control either. There are times when I have wanted to include, say, a caption, but not my keywords. And I can
Right.
do that in other programs. You cannot do that in Apple. But for
Yeah.
our general users, most of the time, if you're doing this on your computer, right? So if you're doing it by text or email, you're automatically exporting the changed version. Apple assumes that that's what you want to do because you made the changes, which makes sense. If you're doing it on your computer, then most of the time you're going to want to choose just export two
Um,
photos.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that will include the changes that you've made less
yep.
the two caveats that
Right.
we've given here. And most of the time, that's what most people are going to do, unless you're a photographer. So I do sometimes export. I keep my original files. I shoot in RAW with my camera, and RAW always creates an XMP file, a sidecar file, because you cannot bake changes into a RAW photo.
Exactly.
So anytime I export, I'm going to export as a JPEG usually, and then I can choose if I'm going to bake it in. But the raw always stays behind.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely getting into the weeds today. I
Well,
just want to make sure that everybody understands we're talking about two different things, really. We're talking about the casual user who doesn't see a lot of this stuff, or at least it doesn't see how it works. I think a lot of casual users know how to add keyword or a caption, especially if you listen to our first attack on the subject, which was back in February, episode
two,
33, 32,
I
sorry.
think. Yeah.
Um, 32, yes. And so, what we're talking about now with Kim is what's actually happening behind the scenes, which is important to understand if you are using more complicated programs such as Mylio or Lightroom or Bridge or Capture One or those programs, because that is where this behind the scenes stuff matters.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you're not going to see it.
Yeah. So the benefit of understanding what you should be looking for to see if you've got all the data is, I think, really important because when you receive shared files from someone else, a lot of times that information that might be important to you and you think you're getting when someone shares that image might already be stripped during the sharing process.
Well, and this is a problem that I think is going to get worse, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So, if I may, um, depending on how you're sharing your photos, when we talk about stripping off the metadata, that is very intentionally done for privacy reasons.
Yep.
You're sharing stuff across whatever it may be, WhatsApp, Facebook, even email, whatever. And these programs are trying to keep privacy front and center. And so they're going to strip your metadata and share your photo, right? And I think, especially as we get more and more into our digital areas, and now with AI and everything, I think we're going to see more and more of this stripping happen. And that can lead to some real problems, especially when you get to date information.
Right.
Yeah.
The problem is, in my mind, is that, and this is something I struggle with a little bit, is I think stripping privacy information is really important. I think you have to be able to have that option to be able to strip it. The problem with my thinking with this is that it strips off the information that I truly think is private, faces, names, information, location,
Location. Hmm.
those kind of things. But it also strips off, in some
Valuable.
cases, really valuable
Yeah.
metadata that I don't necessarily think adds to privacy. It takes parts of the baby with the bathwater.
Right. It
And when
does
you,
all instead of some.
right. So, I mean,
To
I
be
would,
fair, all is a safer way to go. So, Meta, Facebook, and Instagram originally used to allow you to upload and it would keep all of that information. And then there were lawsuits and outcry, et cetera, because there was
absolutely.
too much shared. So now when things are uploaded, everything is stripped.
Yeah,
So if
it's
you
either
download a
0 or
photo out of
100.
there, yeah, it's either do or die for them. And honestly, for social media, I would rather have it all stripped. I think where we want to
And
keep it is when it's more personal sharing, person to person.
that's
Yes.
right.
And
But
that's what
here's
we
the
get asked
thing.
a lot to do
Yes.
because people are working on their private legacy collections that they then want to share with their
Yeah.
children, their grandchildren, their other relatives or family members, and they, aren't sharing the valuable stuff that is going to make that photo even more valuable in the future, which is
Yeah.
all the
That's right.
context.
So the
Yeah.
trick there is that you need to be in a very secure environment to be able to
Right.
do this work and to be able to share this work. You need to be sure that you're doing it in a way that's either encrypted or somehow really secure so people
Mhm.
can't get into that information because it's two things. One is sharing with just everybody, which a lot of that is happening. But here's the problem. Again, I don't have a problem with stripping everything, but for casual users, as soon as you've stripped everything, you've also stripped the date.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
if these people are then pulling these into their personal collections, what ends up happening is a lot of applications won't just bring in and say this photo has no date. And that has been a big source of contention for a long time with a lot of
Yeah.
people. And that is because really, and I don't know if you want to get into this, but pull me back if not. Allison, you're the one who keeps me out of
No, we're gonna go there.
we're going to go there.
Because it can't bring in with no date. Just to back up 1 second and then we'll continue your thread, is the photo has to have a date.
The
It can't
problem is
exist
what date?
without a date. Like, right. But so
That's
that's
right.
why it's everything. If the date has been stripped, then the program that you're bringing it in with or something has to add a
Yes.
date, whether the date makes sense or not. So I just wanted that to be
Therein
clear.
lies the rub, though.
Therein lies the problem.
Well,
The
and the
problem
other
is,
issue, let me
go
just say
ahead.
what the
Please
other
do.
issue is there's not a standard how the date should be.
Oh, sister, you are so correct.
Yeah. So between all these different, app developers, they're not taught library science. They're not taught archival quality museum,
Mm-hmm.
procedures on how to,
Do it.
save your metadata. So, these developers look at dates differently than the rest of
Yeah.
us who are date driven because we're trying to organize their photos or we're trying to, add that context. And if the only date we have is the scan date or the date that was sent to me in a chat, then I have to figure out how to bake in the additional information so it makes that file more valuable to me in the
First, you have to
future.
figure out what the actual date is.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
And I
yeah.
like to refer that to that as the snap date because there are so many different terms and so many different metadata fields and terms, and they get used interchangeably, and then sometimes people use them erroneously.
Mhm.
And so really the one date that we talk about when a picture was taken, just for casual purposes, I call it snap date. That is when the shutter was depressed, right? Or the
Right. But
picture
that
was taken,
equals date time original
which
if
is
you can
X. Yeah,
see, which you should be able to see in certain programs.
In some programs, you can.
And if you don't see it, you may have to do a little bit more digging, which I hope we'll talk about today, like in Finder or in Windows Explorer, or find tools or apps that can let you see it. But
that's right.
the a lot of manufacturers will use the date last modified or the date last
That's
edited.
right.
And so then it wipes out any previous other date, which is the important date.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And just
exactly
to bring
right.
this into focus, I think everybody would understand pretty much everybody has probably taken their phone and they've been somewhere where somebody has an old photo and they take a picture of it, right?
Right.
They take a picture of this old photo on the wall of Grandma Jane, and then in their photo library, you're an Apple user, you're an Android, it doesn't matter. You now have this picture of photo of Grandma Jane when Grandma Jane was 5, and the photo is showing in your camera roll as June of 2026.
Right.
Right.
Clearly, the picture of Grandma Jane when she was 5 was not June of 2026. And that is where the problem comes because how are you ever going to find that? One, it's wrong, obviously. But even if that doesn't bother you that it's wrong, how will you ever find that again? Because when you're scrolling,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
and
and
that
it's
The
even
is
worse because
one
if
of
you
the things
pass
yes,
this along as
yeah.
legacy or family
yes.
heritage,
Your
then
kids
it,
will now think Grandma Jane was 5 in January of 2000 or June of
and the
2026,
further
and
away
they won't
that date
understand how
gets,
that
the
works.
more, yeah, that's right. So
Little time travel.
there are two separate things happening here. One is you're basically taking a scan because even if you're taking a picture of another photo, it's the
Yes.
equivalent of having had it scanned because anything is going to put that current date that that scan was created, whether it's a photograph of a picture or
Because it's the
whatever.
time you click the shutter. You
It's
press
the
the
time you
button.
click the shutter.
Yeah.
So you've got that problem, but you also have the problem of actual digital photos that because they've been shared in a way that has stripped off all the private information, it also took, like I said, the arm of the baby with it and took the time
Yeah.
off of it that the actual original photo was taken. And so it's kind of two separate things, but it is the same thing. With the scan, with the snap, where you've taken an old picture, it's pretty easy to see that's wrong. And the first thing I do is I would stick that into a folder called undated because that
Mhm.
tells me this definitely needs to have its original date, its snap date changed, right? So as you're going through your photos, if you happen to see, oh yeah, that's clearly not right, stick it in a folder rather, called undated to separate it out. And that could be the case even with digital photos. If you know it's not
Mhm.
right, try to separate it because it's not
Yeah.
necessarily, and especially if those dates are closer, it's not necessarily easy.
Right.
Yeah. And in Apple Photos or something, just stick it in an album
There
Yeah.
you
called
go,
Undated.
undated.
And
Yep,
that way
add
at
to an
least, and
album.
actually that does help you if you're looking for, if you decide you don't want to go through the process of even fixing the date, at least you have a folder or, sorry, an album somewhere where you're more likely to find the pictures. But yeah, the digital ones are harder because you don't necessarily realize that the date is wrong
You
until you
don't.
go through say you go to the duplicate utility on Apple Photos and you see the same photo with two different dates. And I
That's
get this
right.
question asked all the time. Wait a minute. It's literally looks like the exact same photo. Why do
Ooh,
they
can
have
we
two
talk
different
about
dates?
that?
We can talk about that.
Can we talk about that?
Let's talk about
I would
that.
love to talk about that.
Tell
So
us how it
again,
happens, Kim.
we talked about the three types of metadata, the stuff that the camera puts in, EXIF, the stuff that's added for photojournalistic and stuff about, who owns the picture, IPTC, and then all of that lovely stuff that we love so much that gives the photo the context, which is the XMP. right? So there are time fields for when the photo was supposedly taken in all three of those. There are time fields for when the photo was digitized in all three of those. There are time fields for when the photo was modified. So you go in and you crop it. That's now modified. You go in and you convert it. Even you're not even affecting the photo itself, but you convert it to a different file type because now this hike file, HEIC, well, I need it for a JPEG because I'm sending it to somebody who might not read hike or whatever it may be,
You
right?
change the name, that'll do it.
You change the
Yeah.
name. That now has a modified date. And here is where the problem is. The important thing for everyone to know, all the way from casual user to professional photo manager, is the only real true source of timestamp is the EXIF date time original. That's the only one. That is the true snap date. Now, you're not going to have that on scans, so you have to redate your scans. If you take a picture, you're going to have one, and that's insidious. Because if you're taking a picture of a picture, then you really need to change somehow that EXIF. We call it EXIF DTO, so we don't have to keep repeating EXIF date time original. All programs will try to read and will represent the EXIF date time original because it is known, even as much weird, different, non-standard practices there are out there. If there is an EXIF date time original, that program will take it and pull it into all those different fields correctly. The devil and the rub lies in the photo that doesn't have an EXIF date time original and it's blank. As soon as that happens, what will happen, and it can even be under the field capture date, which everybody thinks is the date, the time the photo was taken. That is not. Capture date is not actually a metadata field. It is a representation within different programs like Lightroom Classic and other programs like this. And what it'll do is it will go out. And in a lot of cases, as soon as you do something like change a name, change a file date or anything, it will add an EXIF modified. It'll add the date that you changed the file name, that you converted the file, any of those. It'll add it to the EXIF modified field. So these things go out, they look at EXIF date time original. There isn't one because it got stripped or whatever program we used, or we emailed it and we added it to our collection, and now there's no EXIF date time original. But it goes, ooh, EXIF, I love EXIF, and it'll jump to the next field and it'll grab the EXIF modified date and represent it in all those other different fields that we see. It can be, let me find some. We have date created. We have date time. We have GPS date time. We have sub-second fields. We have capture date. We have date digitized. We have all these different fields in all these different three areas of metadata. So what the casual user needs to take away from this is that the date that a picture is showing cannot necessarily be foolproof trusted. You might be seeing a date associated with your folder, with your photo, with your file. And if it doesn't seem right, there's a reason. And the only way you can truly know, I'll tell you, one of the signs that you'll see is, like, for instance, you go in and you change something, right? And this happens a lot in Lightroom. I see it all over the different circle and Facebook pages that we belong to as photo managers, where somebody will change something in Lightroom and all of a sudden the date taken has changed. It's called capture date in Lightroom, and it's changed. They've exported it, they've changed a name, they've renamed their files, they've done something, and it changes, which is a huge flag. I have no EXIF date time original. If the capture date is there, it doesn't mean that there's an EXIF date time original. And as soon as you do something, if this date changes, that is an instant flag that there isn't an EXIF date time original. So the big trick is to, how do I look at my photo to see if it actually has this EXIF date time original? You have to know where to look. You can find it. You can find it in Finder. You can find it in a lot of these different programs. One of the problems is you can only find it one photo at a time. You have to bring up the image for the one single file and look at it. And if you're dealing with tens of thousands or even hundreds or millions of photos, that's not practical. As photo managers, we can't do it that way. And so then the trick is, how can I look in bulk and sort by EXIF date time original so that all the blank ones come up at the top? And you can do that with a few different programs. Then the next trick will be, how do I retain the information of where those folders, where those photos are located? Because if they have no true snap date, you're going to want to be able to know what is the true snap date of these. And it might be that the only source of information that really leads you to that is clues in the folder name of where that photo exists.
But even
That's
those can be wrong. Let's
even
just
those.
put
Oh,
that out
oh,
there.
yes. But
I'm quite hesitant to change dates a lot of times because, when I started working, I was like, oh, look, here's a folder that says, 1990. Well, that's too early. We'll say 2004 something something. And then you actually go into that folder and there are clearly photos in there that are not 2004.
it's
So
become a dumping ground.
it's just the random whatever. So you
Well,
have
it's
to be really
either
careful.
that or back in the early days, if you didn't purposefully change the date time of the camera, that you
Oh,
were
yeah, that too.
Oh God.
Oh yeah.
so
Oh, I
Even get
mean,
me started.
I went out birding a few days after I got home from Europe. And because our piping plover chicks have hatched, everybody, they're now a few days old, but they were 2 days old. So I went down to the lake and I went to photograph them. And I was lucky enough to see them. And I get home and I pull out my SD card and I stick it in my computer. And guess what? I'm
Everything's on.
8 hours off. All of them are 8 hours off. So, I knew right away why that was. And I was able to time shift. I literally told my program, take these 8 hours back in time,
yep.
and then they're fine. But if I hadn't done it right away, if I had waited
Yeah,
whenever, I'm going to be thinking, hold on, I was not down at the lake at 2 a.m. This doesn't make sense. It's broad
Right.
daylight. What's happening? So there's all sorts of ways that it can be wrong. And you might have printed photos that have the wrong date printed on the front. You might
That's
have
right.
folder names that are wrong, file names that are wrong.
Yeah, I was just going
So,
through a client just recently, and even with the printed ones, the older photos with the print on the side of the date, well, these
or on the
people
back, yeah.
very obviously kept using the same roll for 2 years, and then maybe 2 years later went and had it developed.
Yeah,
So
right,
now none of those are really valid. It's
yeah.
everything is investigative, everything is a puzzle, everything has to be sleuth.
right. Well,
But
and
let's
people
um
didn't,
let's
yeah,
let's break it down a little though. So our casual user, it's less important. You want to get it right, generally speaking. But if you don't remember if something is July the 15th or July 17th,
Yeah, that doesn't
it's
matter as
not
much.
going to make a whole lot of difference. So you need to understand when it matters, and that's where you put your efforts. So for me, with the little chickies, it matters to me.
Of course it does,
It
because you're
matters,
Alice.
of course, it matters to me. So
yes,
I had to fix it, but sometimes it doesn't matter. So I don't want, I guess my only point here is I don't want people listening to start thinking, oh my gosh, now I have so much more work to do
right.
No,
because now I have to go and find these photos that are wrong and figure out the right date. You don't, you only do if it matters. And you'll
If
only
it
know if it
bothers you
matters if
when
it
you're
matters to
scrolling,
you.
right,
there is
Yes.
one caveat, and I'm sorry to be the one who keeps saying, yeah, but the sky is falling. But I'm going to do this a little bit. And that is because, let's say you don't have that exit date time original. And it doesn't really matter, you're a little bit off or whatever. But the problem is, okay, so it's close. You sent through WhatsApp a picture the day it was taken. And so now it shows the date of the day it was taken. But because it doesn't have the exit date time original, the first time somebody goes to modify that picture or changes anything or converts the file type, that date now is going to change to that date.
right.
And it's going to keep changing with every edit because the source is actually blank.
Empty. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is the one thing I will warn of. So if it
But
looks good enough,
again,
you don't have
I
to be
just, I,
so.
yeah, I
Okay, go
just don't
ahead.
want
Go
people
ahead.
to be super worried that they have to do all this extra work because I want people to be able to get organized as best they can and not be thinking that we're piling on, that you have to do all of these extra things because honestly, For a lot of my clients, close enough is close enough. And
Right.
then for other clients, depending on what it is, it has to be exact. And yes, we do go in, and I always go in and change the dates. It's just that I don't spend a ton of time trying to figure out is it July 15th or July 16th, but we'll go in
No,
and change the date.
I'm
So
with you on that.
I just want to make sure that we got a bunch of different kinds of people listening. And if you're
I
the
understand.
casual user, all your stuff's in Apple, it's staying in Apple, you don't really
Yeah,
need to
you're
worry
fine.
about it. I would say go in and fix the ones where you've taken a photo of Grandma Jane and she's 5 and
That's
that's
right.
absolutely wrong. But you don't need to go down this rabbit hole. Now, if you are a professional photo organizer or a professional photographer or someone in these fields, it matters a lot. And
It
you
does.
do have to go in and fix it, or you're really not doing your job. And
So
if you
let me
don't
go
know
ahead.
the exact date, then you work with your client to get as close as you can, but you still fix the proper field
Right.
so
That's
that it's
right.
there.
So that's the difference between, people who are doing their photos and then people who are hiring professional photo managers.
Yes.
So going back to the hat of the casual user, the good news is that right now in the collections that I'm doing, we're talking a small percentage of pictures that don't have an exif daytime original. My only fear is, though, the more people use sharing platforms, if they don't realize what they're sharing, that there will be a bigger percentage of photos that don't have an exif daytime original that may get pulled in. And I think it's important for even casual users to be aware that when you're sending things, if you really have a photo that matters to you, that you want to have as part of your collection, ask the person to send you the photo. Download the photo and send you the original, right? Or
Yeah.
somehow make sure you get the metadata. Because if you're just sharing stuff willy-nilly via WhatsApp or whatever different platforms there are, or even email to some degree, you have to be careful that you're not sending a smaller version or a stripped down version
Mhm.
of a JPEG for, sake like that. And there are different ways you can transfer them to in order to
Yeah.
keep the bigger file size in the original. I
And anyone sharing
I
by
think the
social media, just
casual,
know they're all wrong. Like you shouldn't be sharing by social media. No,
that's right.
Well,
seriously,
and
that it needs
But
to
I
be
think it's
said
important
because
for
there's
people to
plenty of
hear if
people that put all their stuff on Facebook. And
that's
this is
right.
right.
how they share with family. And just know, okay, yeah, they can see those, but just know that that's every piece of metadata is being stripped from that photo. So if you're sharing and of your new baby and you're sharing it with your mom and she downloads it to keep it, it's going to be wrong and it's going to
Right.
be small and it's not a good file. So you're better
It's not a
off
good file.
doing it a
Well, and
different way.
and that's the other thing is just know that the actions that you are taking could cause this issue so that you don't want social media to be the place that hosts your library.
No,
You don't
not
want so
Shutterfly,
right
not
and
social media.
not Shutterfly. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of other companies that we get involved with because our clients tell us, "Oh, all my pictures are up in Shutterfly, or maybe they're somewhere else."
Yeah.
And so, if that's the case, we need to consolidate their library. And in doing so, we realize that some of those sources where they thought their images were safe actually caused this hiccup for
Yeah.
them,
That's
right?
right.
That now we have to unravel and figure out.
That's right.
And you
So it's
wouldn't necessarily know it
Right,
either. You know, when
no,
Shutterfly started, they were encouraging everybody upload everything for safekeeping. And now, well, they kind of do and they kind of don't. They've changed a bit. But at that time, people were not thinking about this problem. They didn't know about this problem.
right,
no,
And so it's not your fault if that's where your stuff is and things can be fixed. Just be aware, you know, when you take a photo with your phone, the date is fine. So that's the vast majority of the stuff that you have and it's fine and it's really not going to be an issue. We're talking about the other part. And if you are creating a legacy, there can be a lot of the other part because if you are scanning old photos or you know, poor Grandma Jane gets her picture sent all over the place because one person has it on the wall. There's probably 16 copies of Grandma Jane at 5 years old with all different dates and qualities, etc. And that's where you want to be paying attention as a
yes,
casual user.
absolutely.
yeah,
So now, as a professional photo organizer, I think it's very important to be able to sort by exif daytime original at the very beginning of gathering a digital photo organizing project when we're in the gathering phase from all those different sources. to be able to know which ones absolutely don't have an EXIF date time original and separate them. Because deduping, all of that's going to be important to keep that as a separate entity to be able to
Right,
do
because it
things
just
that do have a date time original.
makes your collection a total mess. Like there's this variable that keeps changing
That's
potentially.
right, potentially. And then
Yeah.
when you give it, then this is the rub. Even though it's a small percentage of those photos, you give it back to your client. And if your client just happens to go in and say, "What? Why is
Yeah.
this photo here? This is not at all." And then they're like, "Okay, what happened?" It is, I think, imperative that we understand the importance of that one field and how it can, the ramifications, that these repercussions that can go throughout the collection because that one field isn't there,
Right.
so that we can separate them out. We can do our work knowing that it's full and right there. And then we can also go back in and at least put an estimated date and into that field, right? So this problem won't happen anymore because now you've got something there, right? For these collections that people are paying us a lot of money to do this photo organizing. Professional photo organizers need to know how to do that, and then to be able to do that. And what was I going to say? Oh, add the keyword estimated date if you're not entirely sure, right? That's the
Right.
key.
Well, and the
If you're
other
going to go
thing
ahead
is
and do that.
Yeah.
some programs now, and I'm going to talk about Milio in this space, allow you to give fuzzy dates. So you're able to undate a file, you're able to say the season. I don't know why. Oh, this photo was taken in this season.
Spring.
You can also do month and year, but none of those are transferable. And do they benefit your long-term record that
Yeah.
you're trying to keep about that file? So what I teach my clients when I'm sharing this information is if you're working on a project and you just need to undate all these so they don't show up in your regular chronological view that drives you just totally bonkers, then undate them and put them in a folder called undated for you to work on. That's your homework. But otherwise, you need a full date stamp, and the date time stamp is your month, year,
Yeah.
day, month, year, plus a full time stamp of like 12 p.m. or something. And so when I don't know when a photo was taken, I just tell my clients I pick February 1st at 12 noon. And so in my collection, if a bunch of photos show up on that day, those are the ones that I guessed. And that's
Yeah.
how I manage it.
Yeah, they will export, and it makes the problem even harder because if you use the fuzzy date, Mitelio allows that, Forever allows that, probably other programs as well. And there is something attractive about that. So I've seen my clients think, "Oh, this is perfect because I know it was around
It was
1980,
roughly,
so I can
yeah,
just say 1980." And the nice thing about it for them is, when they're in those programs,
Yes.
staying in that program, then things will
it,
sort in a way that makes sense to them.
mhm.
But if they go ahead and export that photo or look at that photo behind the scenes, in Mylio, you can go outside and see it in the folder. Don't do that, please. Anybody
Oh my
listening,
God,
never
no.
go behind the scenes, but you
Swim
can.
away.
Or if you export it, it will create a date because every photo, as we talked about, has to
Has to
have a
have that
date.
field.
So
Yeah.
if it's,
So fuzzy date
if
is
you
only
say,
internal to the viewing program.
yeah, so if
To
you say
view
spring,
inside. Yeah.
right. So if you say like spring 1980, I don't know what date it will actually give it. We don't know what the rules are, but maybe it'll be April 1st, 1980.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be March 15th. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't know.
That's
You don't
curious,
know what
actually.
it'll
I
be.
wonder what it would put. I'm going to experiment with that.
I
That's
did it a
good.
few times, but I honestly don't
It
recall
doesn't
what it
really
was.
matter, but
And
I
again,
mean,
it really, like in the end, in some ways it matters a lot. In some ways it doesn't matter at all, right?
right.
If you're a casual user and you're thinking, well, March is spring of 1980, that's fine. The issue is just if somebody then looks at that photo and says, oh, that was March 1st, that's really important because that was Grandma Jane's birthday. So this must have been taken on her birthday. When you didn't mean that at all, you just meant spring of
Yeah.
that year. And
Yeah.
that's where it gets a little tricky. So
That's
again,
why I
it's
think that
really
keyword,
knowing,
the keyword
yeah,
estimated date has to be there, but then it's
yeah,
the
I use
step
date
of the person has to
approximate.
look at the keyword to associate that this is an
Exactly.
estimated date.
And they may not see it.
That's right.
If you
So,
send that photo with its keyword to someone who looks at it in their Apple Photos library on their phone, they're not going to see that keyword.
no.
So you just have to know where you're
That's
going
the
and where it's
appeal of fuzzy
important.
dates. I
Yes, it
can see
is.
where it's a very strong appeal to just have it there where you just know it's a fuzzy date without having to go, huh, do I have to
Yeah.
go look and see if this is an estimated date? Yeah.
Yeah, and within those programs that use fuzzy dates, you can see right away it's a fuzzy date because it
Yeah.
says, 1980 instead of March 1st,
The full
1980 at
timestamp.
12 p.m. and
Yeah.
Right.
57 seconds.
Again, as long
So,
as you stay inside these programs, a lot of these problems go
yes.
away. It's when you come out of the program you need to know. Yeah, I
Yeah, and
agree.
that is still insanely important because as we know, software companies go extinct on a regular basis.
That's right.
So that is why I think all three of us are always talking about future-proofing your library so that if you did have to change programs, because you want to or because you're forced to, you want your library to be as correct as possible so that when you put it into something else, the something else will read what it should be.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
and that's a whole nother thing because that requires then sort of I think a scheduled export from whatever program you're using, understanding how to maybe once a year, okay, you're an Apple Photos user, that's great.
Yeah.
But all that stuff you've got in Apple Photos, which is great while you're in Apple Photos, if for any other reason you ever had to change platforms, or, I don't know what would happen. I can't imagine that Apple would ever go away, but just for a Godonkin experiment, let's say it did, then all of a sudden, you don't have any of those changes anymore. So even something as seemingly, timeless as Apple, I still think it's a good practice to export out
But
of that, export out of Google using Google
yep.
Takeout, export
And
out of
you'll still get a
whatever
folder
your
of
application
photos
is.
with those wrong dates.
And
Yeah.
you'll still
You
get it.
see it
That's right.
everywhere. Yeah.
You'll see it everywhere. But yeah, yes, that's true.
I was just going to say that when you don't have a copy of your original that you can put your fingers on, then consider that uh, a worrisome task
Mhm.
that you need to figure out how to get your library backed up on something that you can put your fingers on. When you pay for a cloud backup solution, or you're paying for Apple to back up your photos to the iCloud, or Google to their Google platform, I mean, anything can happen. They can block your account. You can try to, your account could get hacked. A lot of things can happen where all of a sudden what you thought was totally fine and safe, now you don't have access to that. I was helping my brother not too long ago. He called me and he said, there's something going on with my iCloud and I don't see my files. Well, the short story of that is that he changed his email address that was his Apple ID, his user ID that he logged into. And on one of his computers, it was still using the old account, and on the other one, it was using the new account. And when he tried to re-authenticate, he couldn't get that code that they're trying to send to you because
Right.
they kept trying to send it to
Mhm.
the other device that wasn't logged in properly. So we were able to save his iCloud, but that was the first time that he ever considered taking my advice to figure out a way to back up that iCloud so that should, God forbid, he lose access again, he
Mhm.
still has all his files.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you
you know,
need both.
you
Everybody
need
should
a,
have both. You should
yep.
No,
have a little
it's imperative to
drive,
have it.
that
But
you can
people
hold in
don't
your
think
hand.
about backing up
They
their
don't.
iCloud drive or
They
their
don't.
their Google Drive.
Three, two, one.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've talked about that so many times, but it absolutely every single time. And just one last side note on that is everybody should make sure that they have set up their Apple recovery and their
Yes.
Apple legacy
Legacy.
Yes. Set up a
contacts.
person
So you go into
in your library.
settings,
Yep.
yeah, go into settings, search for legacy, search for recovery, and set that up. It takes 2 seconds.
Because
And
if your
that
not information
allows,
is correct, you're not going to be able
yeah,
to get back into your account. And
yeah,
Apple and Google have hands off. They have really strict policies.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah.
No,
So
I know
yeah, a
that
little,
too.
so bringing us back to where we were,
Okay.
what Kim was saying is, or Susan, one of you was saying, once a year-ish, you should make sure your full library is on something that you can hold,
Yep.
That's
or
right.
in a different cloud service than your primary, or just some other place.
Well,
And that way, if things go
I would even go a step
haywire,
further.
well, you should have it more than one. Yes. I mean, now
No,
actually, I think the
my
thing
step
is you
further
should
would
really
be
have like
one
four.
offline. Yeah.
Well,
So
yeah.
I
Well,
believe my whole thing is
the
three,
hard
two,
drive
one,
is
one.
offline. Yeah.
Right. Yes, it should. Yes. So
Yeah.
I, of course, because I also use Mylio, I keep my vaults plugged in, but I always have one offline.
Yeah.
So there would never be a problem if somebody came along with ransomware and said, "Oh, you want your pictures? You have to pay me $50,000." And I go, "No, I don't. I
Yeah.
have an offline vault and I'll buy a new computer, right?" So
Yeah. You never want to have all of your things that's I mean having everything plugged in at the same time defeats the purpose of having so many
a
copies
backup.
anyway.
Right,
Yeah, I
right.
mean if your house burns down, then all four of those copies that you had that you were so good about having are gone. So
That's why
yes, one
one
should
offsite.
be elsewhere.
Yep,
But
in the
going
cloud or
back
offsite.
to, yeah, let's bring us back. We've talked about this many times in many episodes, but let's bring us back to going back to
Where were we?
metadata, um, and where we want to go from here. Because I think,
Well, we're talking about different programs. So what should you know if you are
yeah,
transferring from one program to another? How does metadata migrate? And should you be
yeah,
concerned with anything?
Yes. So typically, when you do an export from any program, you have the option of being able to embed the metadata into the actual files, right? And so, again, you have to be careful because you need to know that when you embed it into that file, that becomes your new original, your new permanent original, right? Unless you keep a separate copy. Now, you can export with metadata separate as a sidecar file, right? Um, and there are ways, for me, I think exporting primarily, though, when I think about it, I have to think of the programs I am talking about, but I think primarily most of the time it burns it into the file. I know if you export from
yeah.
Mylio, it's going to burn your changes into the file. Lightroom, it's going to burn your changes into the file. Photoshop, which is
Now hang
currently,
on. It
oh,
doesn't
Unless you're,
there
yeah,
are switches, there are toggle options
there are,
that
there are.
you have to be careful of in those programs. So in
That is
Mylio,
exactly true. Yeah,
there is
thank
a
you.
safe share button that if you turned it on, it will strip all your data because that means I want to safely share my file with no data. In
Yeah,
Lightroom on export, you have an opportunity to say all metadata or just, except for
people and
camera.
location, I
yeah.
think,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So you do have
And
those options.
And the next level is if you shoot RAW, exporting will change the file type. It'll export to JPEG or something else you choose. You don't export RAW. You can
Right.
copy your RAW file
Right,
somewhere else,
Yes.
but you don't export RAW.
right.
So, yeah, all the little, we're going into all the caveats today because today is a technical discussion, but it's important for people to know, and again, we talked about Apple earlier. If you're exporting from Apple, you have the choice. And I would generally recommend for people that are exporting Apple as a backup or Google, you probably do want to bake it in. If you've done, most likely you haven't done anything to the vast majority of your photos. And then when you have, usually if you're Apple or Google, maybe you've cropped a little bit. If Google, you probably haven't done, it doesn't matter because you can't save anything you add in Google anyway. But I would argue that for most Apple users, you just go ahead and export and bake everything in because otherwise you're not going to know what you changed. If you had photos that you have edited, you won't even know what they are. So to keep it simple, Kim is looking at me like I don't agree.
And do-
But that's what I tell. If I've got a client with 10, 20,000 photos in Apple and they want to make an export, then I suggest that they bake it in because they won't be able to find the ones that they made changes to later unless they do that separately.
my only concern is the timestamp.
So what do you suggest they do though? Because if they do the unmodified original, then they're still going to have the same issue.
Not necessarily. Export the unmodified original will still export it without the exit date time original changing. And you do it by checking the box of export with added metadata. I know this is
This
getting,
is getting into the weeds, yeah.
it is.
I would argue
So,
most Apple users are casual users,
yep.
and I would still stick with keeping it simple and modify and sending out exporting as the modified.
I would
Because I think
say,
the percentage of photos where that's going to be an issue is small enough that
it could be up to 20%.
I think that having your edits baked in outweighs having a small percentage with the wrong dates in a backup
That's
that you're
true.
probably, hopefully, never going to use. But if you did, like if I
Sure.
had made changes to photos, if I had done things, then I would want to find those. Those are most likely my favorite photos anyway, and I want them
Right.
to be correct.
So
Yeah,
I
I get where you're coming from. I really
Yeah.
do. I think that if you see something, even as a casual user, you see something that looks wonky, bring up the information on that file and see if it has an exit date time original, because more than likely it won't if you're seeing date,
Oh, for sure. But what
right?
we're talking about now is taking your entire collection
And
and
exporting it,
exporting the
right?
whole thing, dumping it onto a
Right.
drive for safekeeping that
For
hopefully you'll never
safekeeping,
need.
yeah,
That's
yes.
what I'm talking about. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about
I'm sorry, I have a hard time taking
preserving.
off my
Yeah.
photo manager hat. I really do.
Yeah. No,
You're
you've
right.
got to think your casual
I
user also, right?
I know.
Now, if you've been working with a photo manager, you hopefully won't have those photos
Yep.
because they will have been corrected.
They will have been
And then
corrected.
you don't
Yes, they
have
will
to
have
worry
been
about it.
isolated and
Yeah.
corrected, or at least handed back to you in an undated folder
In
saying
an
you need to
undated
look at
folder.
these.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Because
so
we
I
aren't
would
magicians. Sometimes we really don't know when a photo was, so there is always a folder of ones that we don't know.
That's right.
Yeah.
so I've been playing with a new program that was brought to my attention to back up the Apple Photos app that I've never heard of. It's called Parachute app, and it is something that I really think is a very simple interface. And one of the backup modes, because if you're going to back up your library on a regular basis, you want to do a full backup and then maybe an incremental later on, so it just adds to the
Yeah.
existing backup. You can also do a mirrored backup with this program, but one of the things I like,
Thing.
which will solve the question about do I back up the edited version or the original, is that Parachute will back up both.
Nice.
Okay.
And so I did this not too long ago, and it looks great. I was very pleased with it. And so it also allows you to back up your iCloud drive. So it would have been something that would have helped my brother. I did set
Mm.
him up on a different system. I use ChronoSync to back up my iCloud drive to my NAS. But it's a little bit more technical. This interface for Parachute is a very simple interface. I think any of my clients would be able to use it. So
All
check
right.
that out.
Well, that's good to know. We'll
That's
add the link
excellent.
to that in the notes. And I do want to mention one thing with because we talked a lot about Apple. For people using Time Machine, you need to understand how that works too. And I can explain it, or if somebody else wants to take this one, because I think people think, oh, well, I'm using Time Machine, so all my photos are on that drive that I'm using Time Machine for, so I'm good. Now, quiz question for my two panelists today. Why is that not true?
Because
Who wants to go?
it's incremental.
Well, that's part of what I was
Depends on
thinking
how you
of.
set it up,
But
right?
what's the problem
You
with
don't get
thinking
to
your
see
photos are
your whole
there?
library there. You only get to see day by day or, whatever's been changed. So I I stay away from Time Machine personally.
Well,
I
that's
have
still
it
not what I
running
was
in the
thinking of, actually.
background for a
Yeah.
one-off emergency, but it's not my go-to backup for Mac.
So I use Backblaze, so I'm not going
Well,
to
hold
give
on,
the
hold on.
answer
We
to
need to
somebody
stick
who.
with Time
I
Machine
know.
for a minute, and then we can go
Yeah,
back to
no, I want you
Backblaze
to go
because
on because
you're not hitting what actually I was thinking of, which
Okay.
is that unless your photos are saved as originals to your computer, Time Machine is not going to recover them for you because if they're only in the cloud,
Oh, they're just thumbnails then.
they're just thumbnails. And that's
oh,
actually the point I wanted to
Oh,
go to is because most people
don't.
keep their libraries optimized, meaning that the original is stored in the cloud, but what you're seeing on your main computer are just the thumbnails. And you do that because most people don't have space
Right.
on their
Right.
computers to hold the originals. So unless your Apple library is set to save originals to this machine,
Yep.
and that machine is being backed up by Time Machine, then they are not being
Time
backed
shouldn't
up
show up.
onto
Yeah.
that little
Yeah.
drive. And that is, I
That's the
think, more
gotcha.
important. The incremental stuff is important
Wow.
too, but I think that's where I was going. Okay, now Kim, you can go
That's
back, please.
that's amazing because I actually didn't know that because I don't use Apple. Not a lot. I mean, I have an Apple to help
Yeah.
with
But
clients and
but
stuff.
another
All my
point
stuff
is
is PC.
people will grab out of their picture folder, they'll grab their Apple photo library file, the catalog file, and they will copy it to a backup
Oh, yeah.
or back it up in some other way and say, "Oh, I've got my originals," when in fact that library's been optimized, like
Yeah, it's the
Allison
same
said,
problem. Yeah.
it's the same problem.
Yeah.
So the having your originals downloaded somewhere, even if your Mac has limited space, you can still do it because a library can live on an external hard drive and
Yeah.
be a system library. So reach out and get help if you need help or support with anything like that because
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, people have called me just to help them back up their Apple
Yeah.
photo library. But between that app, what's nice is your files, in my particular case, they're all local. I have an originals, but I could have done this on my MacBook Air. And what that program will do is temporarily download the file, offload it, and put it back to the cloud. So it's
Mhm.
got that, system happening behind the scenes. So you don't need
Does
to.
it, how is it slow? Just
It,
because most programs that I've seen with Apple, that's what they have to do.
yep,
So
it
they take
took
some
several
time because
days.
they have to go and pull that
Yeah, I
photo
bet.
down and then copy it and put it back up. So it's just
Yep.
curious how long it took.
It
Yeah.
it took more than 24 hours.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I hadn't actually heard of that app, so I'm excited to
Neither
go
have
check
I.
that
No.
out too. Yeah.
That's
Now,
really
It
Kim was
interesting.
starting to say something about Backblaze when I interrupted her,
Oh,
so
no, just the
go
fact that,
forward.
I'm thinking about that though, because again, I'm a PC user and a Mylio user, so I've got all of my originals on my computer and on vaults on my desk and backed up in different places and also in the cloud, but I use Backblaze, and so of course it's going to pull the originals. But if you're using Backblaze on a Mac and you've only got the optimized on your computer, then isn't that the same thing as with Time Machine?
yeah.
Yeah, it's only pulling whatever's on your machine. So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
it's optimized,
Backblaze is
that's,
not going to
but
call the
Backblaze,
files
Mm.
down from the
yeah,
cloud.
I don't think Backblaze backs up. Does it back up an Apple library? Like, or does it even pretend to, or is that one of the files that's generally skipped? I don't even know.
I don't know
I've
that
never
because I'm
checked
all
that.
PC. Yeah,
Yeah, I've never
Um,
me
checked that
either.
because I haven't bothered. I
Right.
feel like it might not because it sees that as a program and not as a file.
Well,
And Backblaze does not
just
back
a
up
second.
programs.
well, I am backing up my
So
hard drive. I don't know if,
once
yeah, I
again, we hit a question where we have to figure it out while we're live, which is what we
Exactly.
do all the time.
so
Exactly.
there are exclusions that you can set in Backblaze so you can exclude the applications folder,
Yeah,
but the photo folder would be backed up, but again, it would be backing up that Apple Photo Library
just what's
catalog
there.
file in the state that it currently is. So if
Yeah,
that state is only backing up optimized or thumbnails, you're not going to get your originals.
yeah. So we
Wow.
go back to exporting if you're an Apple user, and same with Google
Right.
as well. You can do Google Takeout
Right.
um, to do essentially the
The same thing. Yep.
same thing.
And Apple offers a way for you to do that. If you go to
Yeah,
privacy.apple.com, you can do a similar Google Takeout concept where you request your data from Apple and you choose which applications you want that data from. So in this case, you choose Apple
yeah,
Photos, and then Apple will send you an email with a link when your files are ready to be downloaded, and then they're just a
Yeah.
bunch of zip files.
yeah.
So it's very similar to the Google Takeout.
So I don't know if you guys answered this because I was over here typing in really quickly to find out if Backblaze automatically backs up Apple Photos
Oh
libraries.
yeah.
And
What's the
it
answer?
does with one major catch, which is, of course, unless you've downloaded your full
Yeah,
size originals, it's only backing up optimized. So there
Yep.
you go.
yeah.
It's just the same.
And
Yep.
optimize isn't nothing, I will
Oh,
say. I
it's
mean,
not,
if
but
you have lost all of your things, if you have the optimized, you still have something. It's just you don't
yeah.
have a file that you could say print or whatever. But You
Yeah,
ideally want to be backing up your originals or full size
yeah,
files.
right.
Um,
Don't print an 8 by 10.
don't print an 8 by 10. Yes.
Well, I think we've run the gamut of our questions that we told Kim we were going to answer, didn't we? I think we're good.
Actually, I think we answered almost none of the questions that we
I
gave
was
to
gonna
Kim in
say,
advance, and we're
actually,
going to
we
have
didn't
her
get
back because we went on a tangent. But I think that's fine because we went wholeheartedly into this date question and the backup question, and we'll save the other things that are slightly different topics for a metadata part three. Maybe we'll have Kim and Anna come back and we'll have a whole panel because we could literally, I mean, Susan and I have done this, Kim and I have done this. We can talk about metadata for days.
we
There is
can.
so much. And if you think about it, we just spent an hour talking about one field. Now, granted, it is the
A
most
few
important
fields, but
field, a few
yes.
fields, but
So if you ask
really,
me what's the most important metadata
is this
field,
the one?
it's that one.
It's
Yep,
this one.
it sure
It
is.
Yeah,
it really
it's
is
your date.
the crux of everything that we deal with on a daily basis is when was this taken?
Well,
We
and I
have
have to
no
say this
idea.
too. Can I add one other little thing that you're going to go, you're in the weeds again? But
Go
I'm going
for
to
it.
say this. I think that, there I've been really getting a lot of questions about this lately, which kind of surprises me, but it kind of doesn't either. And that is, how do you organize your photos? Well, and this is like what
Oh,
Paul says, Paul Einerson, our Mac god. And he has said our Apple genius.
oh, our listeners all know Paul.
Everybody knows
He's
who
been
Paul
on
is.
like 5 times. Yes.
He's such a dear. I love him. So, but this is something that he says, and that is that we're getting more and more, especially with AI and everything, to just a flat,
Mhm.
it's like a jukebox. You just have all your photos out there and you just pull up by virtual searches, whatever it is you
Yeah.
want to pull up and look at, right? But people still like to have their physical photos. They're saving on their drives and things, and all those originals, which is very important. They like to have them in a folder structure because that's just sort of how we think
Well,
as
you have to if it's on an external drive.
you
I mean,
really do. Otherwise, you're never
if
going to find
it's
anything,
yeah,
right?
if it's not in a program of some
That's
kind,
right.
they
So
they have to live
they
somewhere.
have to live somewhere, and you have to have some kind of structure and organization. And so for me, people go, well, I like to do it by my kids, and I like to do it by holidays, or I like to do it by trips. And I'm like, okay, that's a problem because as soon as you get two people in one photo, where do you put it? The only thing that you can actually organize by is chronological order. There is one date. Each photo
Yeah.
has one date,
It's the
regardless of
only
who's in it.
unmovable
Boom.
field,
It's
really.
the only, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
It is the very static field. And so, because of that, right, that's why I say the most important metadata is that date, especially because as we get more and more into AI, and AI is now getting to the point where, unless it's a real personal keyword, AI is now able to do keywording a lot better than just the smart tags that used to be. It's able to
Not
really
with
get a lot
birds. I'll just
with
leave that
birds. See?
there.
So,
Not
and
with
I
birds.
love that because we still have a job. So,
Yes.
but I think it's really important that, to understand that the more AI is kicking into this, that the one thing that I don't think it's going to be able to get down perfectly is going to be this date field and keeping ourselves organized in that date structure. I think it's really important to understand that that is probably the quintessential piece of metadata that we need to make sure is correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
So moving forward, I think we're going to see again more problems with if people don't understand what they're doing when they're with sharing that time field, but also the fact that that is the one thing that when you sort and when you organize, that's the best way to do it. And that's my
Yeah.
last little hurrah here.
I have to hope that I do think some of this problem stems from the fact that digital photos and organizing digital photos and dealing and sharing with digital photos exploded so quickly that the software and the thinking about it couldn't keep up. And nobody knew how important these things were at the very beginning, I don't think. And so I am hopeful that as software continues to develop, and maybe I am off the wall here, but I'm hopeful that companies will realize how important this is and figure out ways to keep things working properly and keep it where you're only stripping the date if you actually mean to do it
So let me
with some
ask you a
kind of save
question.
share.
Can you think of a reason why date needs to be stripped to keep photos private?
I
The only
strip
thing I
dates
can
off
think,
everything to keep, I absolutely do because I don't want people knowing where I was at a given time.
okay, where I
So
was.
yeah, or at a given time. So, if I'm sharing things, I don't, for example, when I go down to the lake and I take pictures of my plovers and other things, I don't want people being able to look at those dates and realize that, oh, she always goes Tuesday at 6:30 a.m. I want that stripped. I don't want people to know that. It's pattern,
So
it's
then
privacy.
it's a
And
problem
by the
with
way, I don't always go Thursday mornings at 6:30 a.m. But I'm saying
sure.
there are definitely
It's
reasons
actually Wednesday.
why. There are definitely reasons why I would want to strip the date in addition to other things.
Okay.
No, it makes
It's,
sense.
It's
And
it's
for
such a
privacy.
snarl
yeah,
by stripping
Yeah.
date metadata. It is such a
No,
snarl because it really does jack things up when it comes to.
but no one else should be sharing my photos.
But then
So
again,
there's that. So if you are going ahead and taking my photos and sharing them and the date is wrong, well, you shouldn't be doing
that's
that.
on you. Yeah, that's
That's
right.
on you.
Shame
But
on you
no, there are very real reasons why you would want to strip that date.
when
Anything with kids, you want to strip the date. Even if they're older, I still strip the date because I don't want people putting things together and figuring out how old my kids are or when their
That's
birthday
right.
is or all of that. So
Well, and I
absolutely.
think that is the problem is that because of the social media and the sharing of things, that's where it's become
Yep.
such a rub. Because, I want to keep my library preserved.
Yeah.
And
But this
the
is
problem
why
comes
you
in
can
with the sharing.
purposefully strip it while you share,
That's the
right?
thing
So
I'm
the
saying is
photos
it's
in
just the
my
sharing.
yes, the photos in my library have the proper dates. And that
Right.
I would never want to lose. But when I'm sharing, depending on when I'm sharing, where and how I'm sharing, I
Yeah.
purposefully strip the date.
Well, you guys, as my friends, happen to know that I am, well, media phobic. And so I don't tend to get out on social media and do
But
things.
this isn't even sometimes social media. I mean, some of it is, yes.
Yeah, but
And a
even
lot of it,
sharing
social media,
platforms,
I would
I'm
absolutely
old
strip the
school.
date. I would strip everything. But
Yeah.
there's other places where I've shared where I have purposely removed the metadata. I might leave the caption saying this is a piping plover, but I will strip the rest of it. Here's another example. Okay, here's another example. And I know these are all bird examples, but owls.
Tracks.
Owls nesting are always protected. So wherever people are sharing photos in any form of an owl and a nest, you have to remove the date and you have to remove the location. You can say that it's an eastern screech owl, but you should be purposefully removing the rest because people then look at that and say, oh my gosh, that was just yesterday. I know exactly where that is. And they all go down there. Then that owl is going to abandon their nest.
Right.
So there are kid reasons too why I do this, but the birds are easier to share. So
yeah.
yes, you will never get
Oh,
me to agree that the date should never be stripped.
oh, no, I asked it honestly and I was
I
curious
know
and you
you
gave me
did.
a darn good reason. So
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah.
It's just,
Anyway,
yeah. Okay.
we can
We've beaten this one to death, I think,
we've
haven't
beaten
we?
this one to death, and people are going to be
Yeah.
like, "What did I just listen to for an hour?"
You
But
should have known when you invited me on.
that was our purpose. We wanted to get into the weeds today, and
And
we
I go there
did.
every time, don't I?
Yeah. But sometimes it's good to go there, sometimes it's not necessary. But what I hope people get out of this is if you are a casual user, I hope you are listening to the casual user side notes. And if you are a photo organizer or a photographer or somebody that where this is really important, for my personal library, everything is properly dated. Everything is keyworded. Everything has GPS because that's who I am. So if that is who you are, then, pay attention and re-listen to the more technical aspects of today. But it's really important to know what is important to you for your library because the most important thing is not creating more anxiety of things that you need to do. The most important thing is preserving what you have and being able to use it in the way you want to use it. So I don't want to scare people off either. And I don't want to add to to-do lists.
So I am sorry if I scared anybody off.
You didn't scare anybody. Look how nice you are with little San Francisco in the
In the
background.
background
I
there.
don't think you ever gave us the name of your business. And I'm not
Silver
sure you
Moon.
ever told us where you
Yeah, I
are,
know I
which
need
is,
to add it to the bottom. I usually have a placard up behind me like Susan does, but I want it to be San
yeah.
Francisco
Well,
today.
you
So
can you can just say
Silver
where's your
Moon,
business?
Silver Moon Photo Organizing, and I'm in Campbell, California, which is right by San Jose, kind of just on the outskirts of San Jose, South Bay area.
Okay.
Silver
And we'll put
Moon.
that Silver Moon, and we will put that also in our show notes too, but I wanted to make sure that you said it out loud.
Thank you. And the other thing
So,
I can do is if I just turn off my video,
There we go. There it
that's
is.
me.
oh,
Silver Moon Photo Organizing.
So at this point, I guess I've signed out. It has been so lovely being with you ladies, said
Well,
the blue
thank you,
box.
Kim. I do think we're going to have you come back. I think we should do an episode with metadata part 3, and maybe we'll have you and Anna come back because what we talked about with her in episode 32 was some of the same, but some quite different stuff as well, both
Yeah.
yeah.
in the way we attack things and the types of metadata that we talked about. So maybe we'll have both of you come back and
Well, I
do
would be
meta
honored to
part
come
3
back.
in a few months or so.
I
Yeah.
would be honored. And
We've
it
never
has
had two
been
guests
such
at
a
once. That'd be
pleasure
fun.
to be invited
Yeah.
onto your podcast, you ladies.
Well,
Thank you so much. Both of you are
we
so dear.
absolutely loved having you. And I love the tech side, so you can come back anytime you want.
Ah, thanks. Me
She doesn't
too.
always
I
let
like
me
the
go
tech
techie.
too. I just always want to make sure that people understand what we're talking about. And sometimes both of
Yours is
you
an important one.
talk a little bit like you're missing some of the pieces in between because you know what they are.
You're the
I
glue.
just am always trying to make sure that our listeners can go from A all the way to D by understanding there's a B and a C. And sometimes your brains work too fast and you guys just go AD. So, yes.
I appreciate you doing that because that's really important. So thank you, Ellison.
Well,
Thank you for
thank you so
being
much
our glue,
for,
our bridge.
yeah. Thank you so much for coming, Kim. And seriously, I'm sure we'll have you back because I'm
Yeah.
loving this idea of part 3. So, um, yeah.
She's thanking me today. Yes, I will beat this horse anytime you want.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
Sounds
it's
good.
important topic. So
Yeah.
Okay.
thank you
Thank
so
you both.
much.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kim.
Bye. Well, yeah, that was my sweet spot. Let's talk about
Yeah.
data and
Yeah.
library science and
Yeah. Well, and we might as well do it with, our NASA engineer over there.
exactly.
I like the tech side too. I like talking about it less. I agree with both of you how incredibly important it is. And I think I like to, it's probably my background is that I like to make sure that we're at a level that everybody understands. Not to talk down to people, but just make sure that all of the steps are covered. You can't go from here to here without understanding what's in the middle. And
Hmm.
it's really hard to do on a podcast. So I feel like we could do it today because had a pretty small, it ended up being a pretty small topic. We were really talking about one or two fields.
Yeah,
And so
very
I feel like
narrow.
we could do that very narrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but super important. And I think that was really fun.
Well, it's just frustrating for us because as we work with a variety of people, they're all at different levels.
Yeah.
They're all at different understanding. They're all using potentially different applications or
Yeah.
devices,
And
and
terminology, different
yeah, and their
terms. Yeah.
terminology is different. So we like to talk about this on a regular basis so that we educate you along the way, and hopefully it begins to click. The more you hear
Yeah.
about this, we are bringing up your tech skills.
Yeah, we're trying.
Yeah,
And if you have to listen to this 2 or 3 times, well, that's what the rewind button is for, the replay button. Because
absolutely.
there are some things in there that, they're complicated. They're
Yeah.
complicated. So you may have to listen a couple more than once to go back and see what the point was. Sometimes I have to too.
Well, this has been great.
Anyway,
Another fantastic episode.
yeah,
I just love Kim, and can talk tech with her all day and
yeah.
figure out
She's
ways to solve these issues that we're given on occasion.
Yeah,
So
she's definitely one of the smartest people that I know, I will say. Yeah.
yeah,
All right. So if you have questions, be sure to send them to us on our website, insidephotoorganizing.com. and we will try and get them answered. And we'll put information in the show notes, like the apps, like Parachute. We'll put links there and Kim's information as well. And we'll see you next time.
Definitely. Thanks, Allison. Until next time.
Till next time.
That's it for our show today. Remember, you can find this episode on all of your favorite podcast apps. Be sure to click follow so you can stay up to date with the latest in photo organizing. We'll catch you next month.